Welcome to our deep dive, you guys, into Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. We'll be using excerpts from the book itself, along with chapter summaries and some of the key themes. So if you need a refresher on this classic, or just want to impress your friends, or maybe you just love a really good dramatic love story with a side of revenge, well, you are in the right place.
It's true, Wuthering Heights is remembered for that passionate love story, but there's so much more to it. It really delves into some of the darker aspects of romanticism, and it questions a lot of societal expectations and explores those consequences of emotions that are just unchecked.
Right, it's definitely not your typical romance novel. One of the first things that I noticed was the two-volume structure. It's almost like Emily Brontë gave us two acts in a play. Do you think that was just a stylistic choice, or was there something more to it?
It's definitely more than just a stylistic choice. If you think about it, the first volume focuses on Heathcliff and Catherine and their really passionate but ultimately doomed relationship, and it ends with her tragic death. Then the second volume shifts to the next generation and shows us the consequences of their actions. This structure really cleverly highlights this theme of generational trauma and how the past can really haunt the present. And it also makes us rethink those initial perceptions of the characters and their motivations as we see how their choices had a ripple effect.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's almost like that two-volume structure allows Bronte to kind of manipulate our sympathies. We might initially romanticize Heathcliff and Catherine's love,
Yeah,
but then the second volume makes us confront that destructive fallout.
exactly. And don't forget the unreliable narrators. We experience this whole story through the eyes of Mr. Lockwood, who is renting a house nearby, and then mostly through the housekeeper, Nellie Dean. And their perspectives color the whole narrative, which makes us question what is truth and what is biased storytelling.
Yeah, I found myself wondering if Nellie was intentionally downplaying certain events, or maybe even trying to shape Lockwood's perception of all the characters. It made me think about how history itself is often a collection of subjective interpretations.
That's a really insightful connection. The unreliable narrators force us to become active readers,
Hmm.
you know, questioning motives and piecing together the truth, much like detectives. It adds a layer of complexity that keeps us on our toes.
Speaking of complex characters, we have to talk about Heathcliff. He's often described as a Byronic hero, so that brooding, passionate figure. Often rebellious and isolated with a dark past, but there's something almost monstrous about him, too. It's like he's both captivating and terrifying.
Yeah, that duality is what makes Heathcliff such a fascinating character. He embodies the romantic ideal of passionate individualism, but taken to a dangerous extreme. He's consumed by his love for Catherine and his desire for revenge against those who have wronged him.
It makes me wonder if Bronte is intentionally using Heathcliff to critique the darker side of romanticism. Like she's saying that unchecked passion, even for love, can lead to destruction and suffering.
Yeah, that's a very astute observation. I think Heathcliff's character serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that even the most intense emotions need to be tempered by reason and compassion.
And then there's Catherine Earnshaw, who is caught between her love for Heathcliff and her desire for a more stable life with Edgar Linton. Her choice really highlights those limited options for women in 19th century England.
Absolutely. It's important to remember the social context of the novel. Catherine's decision to marry Edgar wasn't simply about love, it was about social standing and security. Bronte subtly critiques the societal structures that limit women's choices, forcing them to prioritize practicality over passion.
So we have these two incredibly complex characters, a setting that seems to mirror their inner turmoil, and unreliable narrators who keep us guessing. What's next on our deep dive?
Well, we can't forget about the themes that run through the novel, like social class and the cycle of revenge. These elements add a lot of depth to the story and connect it to the larger societal issues of Bronte's time.
Perfect. Let's explore those further. I have a feeling Wuthering Heights is about to get even more interesting. Okay, so we've established that Wuthering Heights is way more than just a love story. It's a super complex exploration of human nature and those societal pressures, and the destructive power of emotions that go unchecked. But what about those social dynamics at play? I mean, the novel is constantly contrasting those wealthy Lintons over at Thrushcross Grange with those more rugged inhabitants of Wuthering Heights.
Right, that contrast is crucial to understanding what the novel is saying about social class. The Lintons represent that upper class with their refined manners and,
Yeah.
their education and emphasis on social standing. Wuthering Heights, on the other hand, represents a more primal, almost wild existence that isn't really concerned with those societal expectations.
It's like those two settings become these symbolic battlegrounds for Catherine's heart. She's torn between the allure of that social advancement with Edgar and that passionate, almost dangerous connection she has with Heathcliff.
Exactly. And her transformation after she spends time with the Lintons just highlights how deeply ingrained those class distinctions were in 19th century England. Catherine kind of adopts their manners and their values and ends up distancing herself from her true nature and, her feelings for Heathcliff.
Which ultimately leads to her making a choice that sets off that chain reaction of pain and revenge. It's like her decision to marry Edgar activates this cycle of destruction that ends up impacting everyone around her.
And that cycle of revenge is really central to understanding the message of the novel. Heathcliff's mistreatment at the hands of Hindley fuels his desire for, retribution, which then spills over onto the next generation. He manipulates and torments those connected to the people that wronged him, perpetuating that cycle of abuse.
It's almost like a Greek tragedy, where fate and human choices are totally intertwined. You can see those parallels between Hindley's abuse of Heathcliff and how Heathcliff then treats Hareton. It's just heartbreaking to see how that pain is passed down through generations.
Brontë masterfully uses this cyclical structure to show how revenge, while initially seeming like a path to justice, ultimately just corrodes the soul and perpetuates that suffering. It really raises the question, can anyone truly escape those shadows that are cast by past injustices?
It's interesting, though, because amidst all that darkness, there's a glimmer of hope with Cathy Linton and Catherine Earnshaw. Their relationship seems to offer a potential break in that cycle.
Yeah, their connection represents a departure from those destructive patterns of the past. They choose kindness, understanding, and forgiveness. They pave a path toward healing and reconciliation.
It makes me think about the different ways that Brontë portrays love in this novel. Catherine and Heathcliff's love is all-consuming, passionate, but ultimately destructive, whereas Cathy and Hareton's love is quieter, more compassionate, and ultimately leads to growth and healing.
That's a really perceptive observation. Brontë doesn't offer a simple view of love at all. She explores all its different facets and shows how it can be both a source of immense joy and a catalyst for pain and destruction.
I know we touched on this a little bit, but I think it's worth diving deeper into the symbolism in Wuthering Heights. Like, the names themselves are so evocative. Wuthering, suggesting turbulence. Heights, hinting at ambition. And then there's this setting, those wild, untamed moors.
The moors are a fantastic example of how Brontë uses symbolism to just deepen the meaning of the novel. They represent freedom, escape, and the raw, untamed aspects of human nature. It's no coincidence that Catherine and Heathcliff constantly seek refuge there, away from those constraints of society.
And then you have this stark contrast with Thrushcross Grange, which represents order and civility and social respectability. But it also symbolizes those restrictions that are placed upon individuals, particularly women, by those societal expectations.
Precisely. The two settings embody those conflicting forces that are just pulling at Catherine's heart. She yearns for both freedom and security, passion and respectability.
And there's also the constant presence of the weather, the storms, the wind, which always seem to mirror the emotional turmoil of all the characters.
Brontë really masterfully uses weather to create atmosphere and foreshadow certain events. For example, the night that Catherine runs out onto the moors, there's this raging thunderstorm as if nature itself is reflecting her inner turmoil. It's a brilliant technique that adds another layer of depth to the storytelling.
And then there are those ghosts. You have Catherine's ghost haunting Heathcliff and all those rumors of supernatural occurrences. It's like the past is literally refusing to stay buried.
The ghosts aren't simply there for that spooky effect. They represent the unresolved conflicts and that lingering pain of the past. They remind us that our choices has consequences that can reverberate for generations.
Wow, there's just so much going on beneath the surface of this novel. It's amazing how Brontë weaves together those complex characters and a symbolically rich setting, and these enduring themes to create such a powerful and thought-provoking story.
And we haven't even touched on the brilliant use of language. The way Brontë crafts these sentences that evoke such visceral emotions and create that haunting atmosphere.
You're right. There's so much more we could unpack, but I think we've covered a lot of ground already. We've discussed those unreliable narrators, the Byronic hero, the themes of social class and the cycle of revenge, the symbolic significance of the settings, and even those haunting ghosts. What do you think is the key takeaway for our listeners?
I think the beauty of Wuthering Heights lies in its ability to challenge us. It forces us to confront those complexities of human nature and the destructive potential of unchecked emotions, and the enduring power of love in all its forms.
It's a reminder that our choices have consequences, and that the past can shape us in such profound ways, and that even in those darkest of places, there's always a possibility of hope and redemption. It's interesting to think about whether Wuthering Heights offers any sense of redemption at all. Can someone like Heathcliff, who's been so consumed by darkness, ever find peace?
That's a question that has haunted readers for centuries. His death is depicted as peaceful, almost serene, as if he's finally been released from his anger and his obsession. Some people interpret it as a reunion with Catherine in death, which suggests a sort of spiritual resolution.
But it's hard to forget the pain that he inflicted on everyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, can we really say that he's redeemed when his actions had such devastating consequences?
Yeah, it's true that his path to peace was paved with the suffering of others. Perhaps Brontë is suggesting that redemption isn't always about achieving moral purity, but more about finding a way to let go of the burdens of anger and regret, even if it comes at a great cost.
It's a thought-provoking idea that peace can exist in the aftermath of such turmoil. And then there's the fact that Kathy and Hareton do find happiness together. It suggests that even in a place as dark as Wuthering Heights, there's still hope for a brighter future.
Absolutely. Their relationship offers such a powerful contrast to the destructive love of the previous generation. They choose to break free from that cycle of revenge and forge a path based on empathy, understanding, and forgiveness.
So we've explored those complex characters, the haunting setting, the powerful themes of love, revenge, and social injustice, and that rich symbolism woven throughout Wuthering Heights. Why should all this matter to us today? It's a story set centuries ago in a world so different from our own.
The themes explored in Wuthering Heights are timeless and universal. Love lost, the allure of social advancement, the struggle for identity, the desire for revenge. These are all human experiences that transcend time and place. Brontë taps into the core of human nature, revealing both the darkness and the light that reside within us all.
It's a reminder that even though those societal norms and structures may change, those fundamental questions about how we relate to each other, how we navigate our emotions, and how we grapple with the consequences of our choices, they all remain relevant.
And it's not just about individual experiences. Wuthering Heights also forces us to confront the larger societal forces at play. The novel critiques those rigid class structures of 19th century England and highlights how these structures can really limit individual choices and perpetuate cycles of inequality.
It makes me wonder if Brontë was trying to challenge readers to examine those systems of power and privilege that still exist today.
That's a great point. Literature has the power to hold up a mirror to society and force us to confront those uncomfortable truths and question the status quo, and Wuthering Heights does exactly that.
This deep dive has been such an insightful journey. Wuthering Heights is a novel that stays with you long after you've finished reading it. It challenges those assumptions, provokes your emotions, and just leaves you pondering those complexities of human nature.
It's a story that continues to resonate with readers because it speaks to that enduring power of love, the destructive nature of revenge, and that possibility of finding hope and redemption even in the most unlikely of circumstances.
And here's a final thought to leave you with. If Heathcliff and Catherine had truly found peace in death, would their ghosts still wander the moors? Or is it their unresolved pain, their longing for what they couldn't have in life, that keeps them tethered to this world?
That's a question for each reader to ponder. Perhaps it's the very ambiguity of their fate that continues to fascinate us, reminding us that even in death, some stories remain unfinished.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Wuthering Heights. We hope you've enjoyed exploring this powerful and enduring work of literature. Until next time, happy reading.